Hello and welcome to Face Off here on France 24. If you want to be certain to steer controversy in France, here's what you do. You become education minister, you announce that you want to reform the school system. If everything goes according to plan, here's what you get. Street protests, strikes, ideological debates, political fireworks, and in the end, probably no reform. Well, this is exactly what the socialist government is facing, and its education minister, Vallaud-Belkacem, in particular. With me on the set, Philippe Turle from Radio France Internationale and Jean-Marc Gonin with the Figaro magazine. The government claims this reform is necessary to reform a system that is not working anymore. However, its enemies are saying that this is exactly the wrong recipe. Here's the education minister, Vallaud-Belkacem, the former president and conservative leader Nicolas Sarkozy, and the prime minister Manuel Valls on this very sensitive issue.
The middle school system has to be reformed. It's necessary and it's urgent. What would happen if we didn't change the current system? It would mean we would continue to have 140,000 young people leaving school every year without any qualifications. It would mean continuing to have 1 in 4 15-year-old students each year who hasn't mastered the basics of the French language.
I accuse them of being unfair to the disadvantaged. Those who can't read, homes where no one has completed their education and who will find themselves alone, abandoned. Because for me, the French school system is the one that can lead a child from a modest family onto excellence. It's not a school system that caters to one basic level. This is the schooling system of the French Republic.
We will not back down on the issue of autonomy. We will not back down on the reform of middle school. We will not back down on this duty, which is to respond to each student, but with only one thing in mind: success.
Prime Minister Manuel Valls claiming, as the teachers are on the streets of Paris and other French cities, that the decree of the reform will be promulgated as soon as possible. Philippe Turle, why, again, all this controversy? The reform didn't seem to be such a big reform, but it is a debate that's been raging here in France for weeks now.
Well, it's a long story, and as you said in your very complete introduction, when you're education minister of France, it is a recipe for disaster, for strikes, for shouting matches, for arguments, and very little progress on reforms. And I was calculating just before the programme came on the air how many education ministers there have been in France since 1958 and since General de Gaulle created the current Fifth Republic, and there have been a total of 37, which means that each education minister has only been in office for a maximum of about 18 months, and some of them for even less than that. So it's like an ejector seat that you can get into. You're not likely to make very much progress, and if you do, it won't be without an awful lot of arguing and...
But why? Why?
Aggressivity. The reason I think it is because French people don't like change and reform. It's not only to the education system, but the education system is sort of personifies this reluctance to change things. I think people agree on the ground that changes should be made, but as long as it's changes that concern someone else and not me personally. And in the education system, because children are concerned with this, and children are most people's obsession because we want the best for our children, anything that's going to touch what children are involved in and which might affect what your child is going to have to take on or change, then that is not going to work. And I think that is basically the bottom line, how it operates in this country. There are some good points in this education reform, but beyond that, there is also something else that we see, and that is a quarrelling match between left and right and right and left. When the right's in power, the left aren't in agreement with the reforms the right want to make. When the left are in power, which is the case at the moment, then the right don't agree with the reforms that the left want to make, because it's such a good occasion to try to undermine the left so that the right is in a stronger position. I think that is also probably half the problem.
Jean-Marc Gonin, do you agree with Philippe's assessment, or are there some particular points in this reform? We hear those ideological arguments that this is a leftist government that wants to go against the elites. I mean, is there some truth to it, or is the government trying to improve a system? All the surveys are showing that France had a very good education system, but it's been degrading for years now.
Yes, that's the basic assessment that every government should have in sight. That is, every survey now of the French educational system is getting worse and worse. So there is a need, and it's an emergency. But as Philippe was saying, but I would go further, it's a religion. France has no religion anymore. It's a very secular country. But the church, the real religion is education. And there's a church in the middle, that's the ministry. And that church can't be reformed because you have a dogma. And if you touch it, everybody says, oh, no, the dogma is this and this and this, and you can't change anything. And plus, on the top of it, there's a tradition that trade unions inside the educational system, are empowered. I mean, they are managing the ministry. The minister, as Philippe was mentioning, is here for 18 months on average, but the unions, they run the show. So the unions don't want to change anything. Back to your question. It's not as simple as left and right. Inside the left, there is also a debate because everybody has his own idea. But basically, the critics have focused on Latin and Greek, bilingual classes and that stuff. This is kind of elitist debate. But the main thing, it's not the programs. It is the system itself that gives more autonomy to the schools themselves. And as you have that mammoth, that big organization, they all want to be the same. They don't want to be under the orders of the school manager. They want to be bossed by the ministry itself. So that reform doesn't fit their way of thinking. Autonomy is no good, according to them. It's a big public machine, and they don't want to get out of this.
Because one of the proposals, I mean, obviously there's some debate about teaching of foreign languages that would not be as mandatory as it was. But basically, also the idea is to have some kind of team of teachers teaching together and not a single teacher just teaching his own course. And this is apparently, some would say a good idea, but the implementation is what many teachers fear is going to be lacking.
Well, they're basically saying they won't be able to do it because they've already got a lot of work to do just doing the work they already are given. So if they're taking on remedial work or working together, they don't know how they're going to be able to do that. But there are certain worrying signs in the education system, as Najat Vallaud-Belkacem was saying in that interview we saw just earlier. There's 140 to 150,000 school kids every year who leave school without a diploma. There's like 37% of kids which come from working class backgrounds who also drop out of school, compared to only 10% from more middle class backgrounds. So something needs to be done. What the government would like to do is to make the system the same for everybody, so that not only the kids who come from more privileged backgrounds are given the chance to succeed, but everybody is given the same education to start with in the college, and it's not into a two-tier system where you have an elitist system on the one side, or you have on the other side a system where everybody is taught in the same way. What this government wants is everybody to be taught in the same way, for everybody to be given the same chance. So going back to this debate about bilingual classes and German and Latin and Greek, the government argues that only 16% of kids in France are learning German as a foreign language. What they want to do is to bring in another foreign language so that all kids can learn that. Don't just make it 16%. Let's make it 100%. That will give everybody the same chance to improve.
It sounds like a good idea.
That will bring up the level of education in this country. But those who are more conservative are saying, no, that's completely the opposite. You're going to pull down those who are more able to succeed to bring them down to a lower level where they're with all those who can't succeed, and therefore fewer people will get through the system.
Jean-Marc Condin, but this obviously is creating controversy because everyone is sensitive, because it's the kids, it's the future, but it's also about the French system where merit is supposed to be what you're judged on, and it starts in school. And there seems to be a general assessment that it's not the case anymore, that merit is not the only way to determine whether you'll be successful or not.
No, meritocracy is no more the case in our school system because, Philippe was mentioning it, they are trying to lift the kids, as Sarkozy was speaking of the l'école de la République, the Republic school. You hear it every now and then in this country. But the Republic has dropped. You have a lot of kids that lag behind, and they need a special treatment. But people start saying, oh, this is no good, this will lower the level of the schools. But in fact, when you see the surveys, what happens, you have so many dropouts. So you have a certain elite that is promoted by school, and the rest is just our dropouts. They get no diploma, although these kids might have had a degree, a diploma, if they had been helped. The reform that we are speaking of is for kids from 12 to 16, and every teacher tells you that it's the crucial age to prevent them from dropping out. Earlier, it's too early, and then it's too late. So you have to target that very class of age to rescue them.
Very, very quickly, obviously, we'll have to see if the strike continues. It seems there are not many people on strike today. Do you think the government will retreat eventually?
They've already made some amendments, and there will be further amendments, I'm certain, to this proposal. What's interesting is that some of those who would like to strike or were thinking about striking have decided not to strike because they think if they do go on strike against this reform and they're more in favour of the left-wing government of François Hollande, they'll be being perceived as supporting the right wing. So they're saying, well, we're not going to strike even though we don't like this reform. So it might not be representative of all those who are against this reform who are out striking, and we'll see afterwards, as a result of the strike, what decisions the government is making. The government is banking on the fact that not that many people are going to strike, and therefore this reform will go through, but it won't be easy.
They'll probably pull back on certain topics like programs. Those issues are a bit too sensitive, like bilingual and Latin, Greek. They might make compromise on those issues, but I think the structural part of more autonomy to the different schools, that they will try to keep it the way it is.
Okay, we'll obviously be following this very explosive debate here on France 24. We'll see you next week here for a new edition of Face Off.